What if I told you that your addiction is not your enemy, but the most faithful messenger of your soul? Strange, isn't it? We've been taught to fight it, to feel guilt, shame, even hatred. But what if all this battle is only keeping you away from true healing? The truth is, addiction doesn't show up to destroy you. It shows up to reveal. It points to where your spiritual life is crying out for help, where there is a void that needs to be filled with purpose, inner peace, and connection with the universe. So, if you've tried everything and nothing seems to work, stay with me, because what I'm about to share might be the beginning of your awakening. Many people spend their whole lives believing addiction is some kind of inner monster, an implacable enemy that must be defeated at any cost. They try to fight it, suppress urges, make promises, repeat mantras of willpower, but deep down, they realize they are in a never-ending battle. It's as if they are trapped in a maze where every exit leads back to the same starting point. This is the invisible mistake, trying to destroy addiction without listening to what it is truly trying to communicate. Neuroscience offers a paradigm-breaking insight. Every compulsion is the brain's attempt to regulate the nervous system, not to destroy it. This means that when someone drowns in food, alcohol, or social media, they are not trying to end themselves, but simply seeking relief for a pain they don't know how to name. It's like putting a bandage over a wound without really cleaning it. It may ease the discomfort, but it doesn't heal. Addiction, in this sense, is like an insistent messenger, bringing a letter no one wants to open. Imagine, for example, someone who hides every night in endless hours in front of the TV or their phone. At first glance, it looks like laziness or escape. But in practice, it may be the unconscious way of silencing a deep loneliness they cannot face. Another person who drinks too much at parties may not be chasing alcohol itself, but rather the illusion of belonging, of connection. In both cases, addiction is not the root, but the symptom, and behind it lies a message from the soul crying out for attention. That's why the first step is not to fight, but to listen. Instead of asking, "How do I get rid of this?" the real question should be, "What is this addiction trying to show me?" This shift in mindset opens a new perspective. It is the beginning of inner peace, the start of a journey toward enlightenment. When you realize addiction is not against you, but for you, even if in a distorted way, the possibility of prosperity, abundance, and balance appears. Addiction stops being a prison and becomes a portal of spiritual self-knowledge. And here comes a simple yet deeply revealing exercise. The next time you feel the impulse to give into a compulsive behavior, pause. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what exact emotion am I feeling right now? Loneliness, fear, emptiness, boredom? Write it down in a notebook. It may seem small, but this act is like turning on a light in a dark room. Slowly, you will notice that compulsion doesn't appear out of nowhere. It is always preceded by a hidden emotion longing to be seen. This act of observation opens a door. Imagine someone who, every time they feel bored, runs to food. By identifying the trigger, they discover it is not hunger, but lack of stimulation. At that moment, they can choose another path. Maybe reading an inspiring book, listening to a guided meditation, or even practicing a simple breathing exercise. Addiction, which once seemed tyrannical, transforms into a guide. It shows clearly where spiritual energy is blocked and where the soul is asking for movement. Spirituality teaches us that nothing is by chance. Even the most painful patterns hide blessings when seen through eyes of wisdom. Addiction is no exception. It is, in fact, a form of communication from the soul, a disguised cry for attention. When someone embraces this vision, their relationship with their own habits changes completely. Hope arises that behind repetitive behavior, there is an opportunity for expansion of consciousness. That hope is like a flame, small at first, but capable of illuminating the entire path. And if we look closer, every addiction holds a hidden calling. The person constantly seeking validation on social media is not really looking for likes. What they long for is love, belonging, recognition. The one drowning in endless work may not be chasing money or success, but the feeling of being safe, worthy, valued. And the one who gets lost in toxic relationships is not choosing suffering, but unconsciously crying out for healing of emotional wounds tied to abandonment or the fear of loneliness. At this point, we begin to understand how addictions reveal someone's spiritual life. It's not just about psychology or neuroscience, it's about energy, chakras, subtle fields. Food addiction, for example, may indicate an imbalance in the heart chakra, a cry for emotional nourishment. Addiction to power or status may be linked to the solar plexus chakra, revealing insecurity about one's identity. Compulsive consumption or excessive control may be connected to the root chakra, where fears of scarcity and abandonment reside. Through this lens, addiction stops being just a behavior and becomes a map of the soul. It points to where energy is blocked and where healing is needed, and that healing is not only about eliminating the symptom, but about releasing prosperity, abundance, love, and balance. When you listen to this call, you discover that every compulsion, no matter how painful, is also an invitation to spiritual awakening. A powerful exercise is to observe which area of your life suffers most when addiction manifests. If the compulsion appears in loneliness, maybe your soul is asking for more genuine connection. If it appears in boredom, it may be a sign that you need to explore new experiences, expand your consciousness, and seek spiritual learning. If it explodes in fear, maybe it's time to strengthen faith, cultivate hope, and dive into practices that generate inner peace. This simple self-analysis already puts you in direct contact with your life purpose. Think, for example, of someone who always runs to food when they feel empty. Upon closer observation, they realize the emptiness is not in the stomach, but in the heart. This reveals a calling to develop more authentic relationships, nurture spirituality, and cultivate self-love. Another case, someone who shops compulsively may actually be trying to compensate for an inner sense of lack. That addiction points to the need for financial unblocking and reconnection with the law of attraction, which teaches that abundance doesn't come from things, but from a mindset of success and gratitude. And here lies the secret. Every addiction, no matter how destructive, is a disguised master. It is not asking to be exterminated, but to be understood. The more you fight it, the louder it screams. But when you are willing to listen, it softens. Addiction transforms into a guide, leading you to areas of your life that need healing, balance, and harmony. It doesn't want your destruction, it wants your spiritual awakening. And it's precisely here that the turning point arises, realizing that addiction doesn't have to be the end, but can be the beginning. The beginning of a journey of spiritual self-discovery, where each compulsion reveals a part of you asking for light. By stepping through this door, you don't just understand addiction, you begin to transform it into a tool for growth. What once seemed like a prison becomes a path, and it is down this path we go, toward the transformation that is born when addiction is heard and integrated. When you start to see addiction not as an enemy, but as a disguised teacher, something powerful happens. Your perspective shifts. Instead of feeling only guilt or shame, you begin to feel curiosity. What once seemed like a prison now becomes an invitation. And this invitation is to deeper listening. It's not enough to observe addiction from the outside, like watching a storm through the window. You need to step in, feel, understand what it hides behind the fog. This is the moment where spirituality meets the science of the mind. Neuroscientists say that unacknowledged emotions tend to pile up, generating automatic behaviors. Spirituality adds that these emotions are actually signals from the soul, asking to be illuminated. Every compulsive impulse is like an alarm ringing. Hey, look at me. Here's something that needs attention. The point is not to turn off the alarm, but to discover where the fire is. One of the most effective paths is to keep an emotions journal. Whenever you feel the urge to repeat a compulsive habit, write down the time, what happened before, and what emotion arose. After a few days, a pattern starts to appear. Maybe you realize the compulsion always comes after family arguments, or when you feel rejected, or when loneliness hits harder. This emotional map is a tool of spiritual self-knowledge worth gold. It shows the portals that need to be crossed for consciousness to expand. And look, we are not talking about perfection. The goal is not to never feel the urge to repeat a vice again. The goal is to learn from it. Just as the body sends fever when there's an infection, the soul sends compulsions when there's a spiritual wound. Rejecting this is like fighting the fever instead of treating the infection. True transformation arises when you embrace the message instead of rejecting the messenger. Here, let me pause with you who are watching. If this content is making sense to you so far, take a deep breath and reflect. What addiction, small or large, is trying to tell me something? Write it down in the comments, because the simple act of putting it into words is already a step toward healing. And of course, if this video is adding value to your journey, click like, not just as support, but as a way of mentally affirming to yourself, I choose to walk toward transformation. Now let's continue. The process of listening requires courage. Courage to face painful memories, to revisit traumas, to look in the mirror without masks. But that's exactly where the spiritual gold lies. Each compulsion holds a piece of your story that got frozen in time. By listening, you not only embrace your pain, but also release it. And when pain is released, space opens for inner peace, harmony, and prosperity to flow naturally. Simple practices can support this listening. Guided meditation, for example, is a powerful tool. By closing your eyes and breathing deeply, you can visualize the addiction as a frightened child knocking at your door. Instead of pushing it away, you welcome it, ask what it needs, and offer care. This visualization creates a connection with your inner universe, aligning your chakras and unblocking spiritual energy that had been stuck. Another practical exercise is cognitive diffusion. When the compulsive urge arises, instead of saying, "I am this urge," you observe and say, "I am having the thought that I need this." That simple shift in language creates distance, opening space for conscious choice. You are not the addiction. You are the spiritual being observing the addiction. This perception changes everything. Through this process, life begins to change from the inside out. Small victories appear. A day when you managed to observe the compulsion without giving in. A moment when you chose to talk to someone instead of seeking escape. A night when anxiety didn't dominate your sleep because you practiced conscious breathing. Each step is a manifestation of your inner strength. And like a domino effect, these small wins activate the law of attraction, bringing more balance, hope, and prosperity into your life. But the journey doesn't end here. Listening to addiction is only the first step. The next is transmuting it. It's not enough to understand what it wants to say. You must transform that energy into blessing, into strength, into fuel for your life's purpose. And that's where we step into the next stage of this walk, where you will discover spiritual practices capable of turning compulsions into portals of light and abundance. When someone starts to listen to what addiction has to say, a portal opens that once seemed inaccessible. It's no longer about fighting against yourself, but about transforming dense energy into spiritual strength. And this transformation happens through simple yet profound practices that can reframe the relationship with compulsion. Here is where spirituality shows its practical beauty. Instead of just theorizing, it invites us to live. One of the most powerful tools is guided meditation. Imagine closing your eyes and, for a few minutes, directing your breath to the part of the body where anxiety manifests. With each inhale, you embrace. With each exhale, you release. This movement not only calms the nervous system, but also harmonizes the chakras, dissolving energetic blockages that kept the addiction alive. What once was despair begins to turn into inner peace. Another simple yet extremely effective resource is conscious visualization. You might imagine the addiction as a heavy object you hold in your hands. With each breath, this object becomes lighter until it finally dissolves into light. This practice of co-creation is not fantasy. It is the spiritual mind connecting with the universe, activating invisible laws that govern the manifestation of reality. The law of attraction responds to your intention, bringing abundance and balance to areas where once there was only repetition and pain. But it's not enough to just observe or visualize. You need to replace. If you remove a compulsive habit, you must fill that space with a conscious habit. Otherwise, the void left behind tends to call the old pattern back. That's why I propose a small ritual. Whenever you feel the urge to give in to addiction, replace it with a short but transformative practice. It could be writing down 3 things you are grateful for, walking in silence for 5 minutes, or even drinking a glass of water slowly, focusing only on the sensation. The secret is not the act itself, but the intention to redirect the flow of energy. This exchange creates a success mindset. Little by little, you realize you don't need addiction to regulate your spiritual life. You discover it's possible to manifest abundance, prosperity, and hope through conscious choices. And when this process consolidates, something incredible happens. Addiction stops being a prison and becomes a teacher. It ceases to be a burden and becomes a reminder of where you've been and where you no longer want to return. Think about it. Every time you overcome a compulsive urge with awareness, you strengthen your inner wealth. This is the invisible financial unblocking that many don't notice. After all, how many resources, time, and energy are lost to addictions? By redirecting that flow, you create space for real prosperity. Money begins to flow more harmoniously, relationships gain balance, and life aligns with purpose. What once seemed like a small detail in your routine reveals itself as a spiritual turning point. And this turning point is not limited to the material aspect. It touches the heart of your journey. Because deep down, every addiction is just a reminder that you have a greater life purpose. The soul never settles for living halfway. When it feels that something essential is being ignored, it sends signals. And often those signals come in the form of compulsions. But when you understand the message, the cycle breaks, and in place of the void, clarity emerges. This is the awakening, the moment when you look back and realize that addiction was not an enemy, but a disguised master. It led you to look within, to seek harmony, to expand your consciousness. It was addiction that drove you to discover spirituality applied in daily life, to develop faith and connection with the universe. It was through it that you found tools for healing and, above all, discovered who you truly are. And here, at the peak of this journey, I want to propose a simple yet deeply transformative exercise. Create your own mantra of liberation. Write a short phrase that resonates with your soul. Something like, "I am free to choose with awareness," or "My spiritual energy guides my decisions." Repeat this mantra daily, especially in moments of temptation. This act strengthens your mind, aligns your chakras, and anchors your new identity. Because in the end, addiction doesn't disappear with willpower alone. It dissolves when you understand the message, embrace the lesson, and choose a new path. And it's in that moment that life opens to abundance, balance, and harmony. From then on, each step is no longer a struggle, but a dance with the universe. And the dance goes on, always leading you to deeper levels of spiritual self-knowledge and expansion of consciousness. Now tell me, after all this, do you still believe addiction is an enemy, or can you already see the master it has always been? If each compulsion were a message from your soul, what would it be trying to deliver to you today? What emotion do you need to embrace in order to transform pain into spiritual awakening? It's not enough to just watch. You must live it. So I want to challenge you. Choose one exercise I shared here and apply it today. Write in the comments what the strongest insight was for you, because when you share, you not only reaffirm your decision, but you also inspire others who are on the same journey. And of course, if this video touched you in some way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you'll keep learning how to turn your shadows into light, your blockages into prosperity, and your pain into purpose. The awakening starts now. The only question is, will you take the next step?